Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Torah Talk Weekly Parsha with our good friend, Rabbi Moshe Kormornick. Welcome back. Rabbi, it's always a pleasure having you here. I love y'all's trilogy of rabbis. I actually told Rabbi Rafi Mollot, I said, because it's got you and, pardon me, I've only had the other one on once. I forgot his name. But I said you should have like Mollot, Kormornick, and then Blum, attorneys at law. Rabbi is, a whole firm.
I actually have a law degree, so I can help. I'll be the first one with that one.
Nice. That's great. Very cool. Okay, so this week, Nitzavim. Now, I heard when you were discussing with me earlier, you mentioned you're going to cover Nitzavim, and were you going back to Kitisa, or what were you going to do? You said there was a couple different things you were going to do today, as far as your shiur for today. Did I say that wrong?
Right. No, perfectly. So it's a double parsha. It's okay. Nitzavim and Vayeilech.
Gotcha.
The way this happens usually is there are 54 parshas, 54 Torah portions, and there just aren't enough weeks in the year because often there's a Yom Tov, there's a festival, and we need to read the Torah portion of that festival. If that festival happens on a Shabbat, then we put the Torah portion of the festival ahead of the Shabbat, and therefore that's pushed off. So we don't have enough weeks. So sometimes we combine them, like this week. Got it.
Okay, awesome. Well, looking forward to everything. Everything you brought so far to date has been very intriguing and very applicable, in my opinion. So, looking forward to what you got to say.
Thank you. The pressure is on.
Very good.
Okay,
Take it away.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Yes, sir.
It's an honor to be here, and thank you.
My pleasure.
So let's jump right in. Excuse me, a bit of a cough. So once again, my goal with what I'm trying to do here, and again I'm trying to do, I guess, in my own life, is to take things from the Torah and to see how they're applicable to me. And perhaps, when I'm sharing these things, I'm also sharing why they're applicable to me, and perhaps maybe they'll be applicable to you too. Essentially, the Torah is, I'll say it every time, the Torah is not a storybook, it's not a history book, it's a guidebook. It's a guidebook that was written by God, and God is outside of time, and therefore he wrote it not just for the Jewish people who received it at the time, not just for the world who can access it to their degree all those years ago, where we're holding 3,330 something years ago. It is for us today, and it's very, very much relevant. And what I'm trying to do with all these things, and again for my own life, is to take out, I guess, eternal messages from the Torah and see how they apply to me. And this is basically what I'm trying to do over here. So let's jump right in, with your permission, and we'll start with Deuteronomy 30:12. Might be doing some fancy footwork with the jumping around the different verses, but I'm sure with your editing skills you'll put it on the screen in the right place. So 30:12, essentially we are saying, not we, God said, and it's written, it is not in the heavens. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not in the heavens, referring to the commandments, the Torah. And the pasuk, the verse says, it's not in the heavens. Because why? Because I'm giving it to you, and you should know that it's available for you, and it's for you to chase and access and use and live with. This is the message that we're getting in these verses over here. So Rashi, who's the primary commentator on the Torah, he quotes a piece of Talmud, actually, found in Eruvin 55a, if you want to go look it up. And he says as follows: when the Torah says it's not in heavens, so this Rashi, I'll just quote Rashi, he says, paraphrase at least, that, but if it was in the heavens, you'd have to go and learn it anyway. You'd have to go to the heavens and chase it. So this is very strange, because one of the things that I try and do, but essentially Jewish learning is all about, is taking the Torah very seriously and saying there is no superfluous words. In fact, a few things that we're going to, Be'ezrat Hashem, going to be discussing are the inverted quotes, superfluous words that we find in the Torah. Now, if there are no superfluous words, and we find superfluous words, what are we going to do? The answer is that they're not superfluous and they're coming to teach us an additional message. So, with bearing that in mind, we can also ask that question on the Talmud that says this thing, that if it was in heaven, we'd have to go chase it in heaven and learn it. Now, it's very strange, because the Talmud itself says that one should teach b'derech katsara, in a very short-handed manner, in a very succinct way. For various reasons, it's so there's no nothing gets lost in translation, nothing gets distracted. Essentially, the way of the Talmud, at least, I don't know if I can claim such a thing, but the way of the Talmud, at least, is to teach in a derech katsara, in a short-handed way. If so, we can ask the question, what's going on over here? The Torah says that the commandments are not in heaven. And Rashi says, but if they were, which we know they're not, then you have to chase them, you have to go, and you have to learn it. So Jews like to speak, it's yes, but wasted words, no. So what's going on? Why would Rashi even say, why would the Gemara say, like, there's a hypothetical thing which we know is not true, but if it would have been true, you'd have to go and get it. It's not normal. I'll just say that in an appropriate phrase. It's not normal. That's not how things normally work. So again, let's take it back to our initial principle. All these things, whether they're written in the Torah or whether written in the Talmud, they're coming to teach us a lesson. Those people in those days and every generation since then, and certainly in our generation, and if I dare say, I think people in this generation need it most. You know, I think as the generations go on, the connection and the connection to Torah and to morality even is shrinking and weakening, and perhaps, you know, it's up to us to really work hard and strengthen ourselves in this area. So, okay, back to the question. What is going on? What is the message behind Rashi saying, if Torah was in Shemayim, if Torah was in heaven, we'd have to go and chase it? Why would he say that when we know it's not? So I heard this in the name of the Brisker Rav. I'm not going to, I don't quote all names, but everything I say, if it's good, I have a source for it. Feel free to email me. I'll give you where I got it from. And if it's not good, you're wrong. No, I'm joking. In my mind, I might be wrong, and if I'm wrong, it's definitely me. So, okay, back to the question. Why are we saying this hypothetical thing? That's not true. Because we know that the commandments are not in heaven, they're down for us. In fact, we even have Moses came down with the tablets, and he came and gave the Torah to us. So what is going on? Long-winded question to ask that question. What is going on? And the answer that the Brisker Rav said is as follows. So whilst it's true that the physical Torah, as it were, was brought down and given to us, and we each have access to it, and it's written in the Chumash, or wherever you're going to get the Torah from, an accurate translation, or all the commentaries, however we're able to access it, that's where it is and it's available. It's always got to be available because it's our guidebook to life, as I said before. So what does it mean, if it was in heaven, you'd have to get it? We know it's not in heaven. Now, the answer the Brisker Rav said, which I think is very applicable, is as follows. He says, it's true, it's not in heaven. But the message we're learning is, if it was, you'd have to get it. Again, what does that mean? It means for sometimes, I think in those generations, but certainly in these generations, you might feel it's so far away. Torah is so far away, whether it's the learning aspect, whether it's the morality aspect, the values, what's expected of us, responsibility, all of these things, they can at times, sometimes many times, a lot of times, sometimes, they can feel so far away. I'm so far from what I'm supposed to be. Even when you know you're supposed to be in a certain thing, I'm supposed to keep this level of morality, I'm supposed to be doing this. It's so hard. It feels like it's in heaven. And what we're being told, it's the Torah. You have to go and chase it and learn it. Because Torah is about hard work. I'm using Torah as a general. Really, life is about hard work. There's no such thing as, oh no, God, this is going to sound really bad. I don't mean to say there's no such thing as Torah. What I mean is as follows. There's God, and there's what God wants from us. Now, that happens to decipher itself in the Torah, which is the written Bible, and also in the oral Torah and the Medrash, the Talmud, and along those lines. So the Torah, the encompassing Torah with the written Torah and the oral Torah is our guidebook, essentially, to understand God's will. This is how it works. So what is happening? We are chasing what God wants from us. sometimes it can be so far away. It's never far away in reality, but it feels so far away. We feel so far distant. We feel not there. Even if we know we should be there, it's just so hard to get there. That is the message. Never give up. Torah, doing what's right, is hard work. It's supposed to be hard work. That is exactly, God chose us to live and be alive in order that we strive for greatness. We try and achieve the best we can achieve. That is what life is about. Life is about jumping over hurdles and getting to the finish line. If the finish line was coming to us, or if we had a gentle stroll in the park, it wouldn't be worth much. And God wants to give us all of his greatness, and he can only give us of his greatness when we strive to get it. And that means striving, that means hard work. In fact, even just in terms of learning, there's a beautiful story I heard with the Chaim. Chaim actually, in Judaism, we sort of celebrate Yartzeit. Yartzeit is the day of their death. In some schools, it's a celebration. Really, it's a celebration of life. The celebration of someone's death is a completion of their life. So it happens to be that yesterday was the Yartzeit, the day of the death of the Chaim. The Chaim is how can you describe the Chaim? You can't. He died in 1933. He was the greatest Jew in the world. Then let's just leave it at that. The biggest, best. And he had yeshiva, and there was a boy who came to him, and this boy he had a sad tale. He was I think he was an orphan. The saddest, if the Chofetz Chaim was the greatest Jew in the world, this kid was the saddest kid in the world. And the Chofetz Chaim once invited him to his office. He didn't have an office. He probably had barely a stool and half a table. Knowing the Chofetz Chaim and the abject poverty that he lived in, he wasn't living in this world. He was anything that he didn't need, essentially need, he didn't have. That was his. He didn't have chairs. He didn't have tables. He just had what he needed. He was an angel. So he invited this boy into his office, let's say, and he said, "Tell me, how's your learning going? How many pages of Talmud have you learned this whole month?" And the boy said, "Rabbi, I've learned 3 pages." So the Chofetz Chaim said, 300 pages? Wow. And the boy was embarrassed. The Chofetz Chaim thinks he's learned 300 pages. It's even more embarrassing to say 3 now. So he said, "No, Rabbi, I've learned 3 pages." He said, "Yeah, 300 pages." Rabbi, 3. 1, 2, 3. 3, not 300. So the Chofetz Chaim, "My son, I know what you're telling me, but your 3 pages is worth 300 pages because you did it in such difficulty and such suffering and such whatever your circumstances that made your learning almost impossible to do, and you sat down and you managed 3 pages, it's worth so much more." In fact, this is really the example of our lives, that there are things, and maybe we look at people, and let's just stick to learning for a second. You look at a guy and you think, wow, he's doing amazing at learning. I spend, thank God I'm fortunate enough to spend most of my day learning, so it's on my mind. Like you sit down and you have a whole room of 100 people on the screen and they're learning, amazing. And you look at this guy and he's so talented, he's so clever, he's learning so much. I don't take anything away from him. But you have another person, me, struggling, not so great, not so good, but he did 5 pages and I managed 5 lines. Who's greater? Obviously we don't know who's greater, we can't judge who's greater. God's judgment is upon us, and it's not for us to judge. Even if we were capable, if we knew how to judge, we'd be God, because he judges not only our abilities, everything we strive to do, not just learning, the way we interact with people. It's for the point of our exercise, who's a greater learner? So it could be that the weaker person is a greater learner. Why? Because he works harder. His 3 pages are worth 300. And the other guy who's very, very clever, he's actually at a disadvantage because he's naturally able to achieve more, and he needs to work hard. He does not need to work as hard, and therefore, even though he'll achieve a lot, he's actually working less. So he might come at the end of the day and say, "Hey, I completed the whole of Talmud. Give me my reward." And God might say, "No, I'm sorry. You actually didn't work as hard as this guy who just finished 1 book. So he actually gets more reward than you. But it's fine. You're a wonderful person." That's it. To make the happy ending, and you'll get this reward, and they all live happily ever after, and good. Okay, so we've just said the following message to summarize that Torah and life and morality and what we need to achieve to do is sometimes seems very distant from us, very hard. The answer is you've got to do it. You've got to work hard. That's what life is about. Use every opportunity you can to work hard to push yourself and to try and get there, and know that your struggles are actually what is making you great. In fact, I'm just thinking now that there's a famous story. It's famous because I know it. That's the rule in life. If you know it, it's famous. There's a very famous story, because I really know it, of a butterfly. Butterflies start off as caterpillars, and they're in a cocoon. A cocoon. And there was once a kid, and the caterpillar he turning into a butterfly, and he started to struggle in his cocoon, whatever. And then the kid came, and he saw Nebuch, this poor butterfly, caterpillar / wherever it was holding in its lifespan. He said he looks like he's really struggling. He wants to get out. So this kid broke open the cocoon a little bit so that the butterfly could fly out easier. And after another week or two, the butterfly flew out. But it couldn't fly so well because its wings hadn't developed properly. And when this kid investigated further, he discovered that it's like muscles basically. That the more you push, the more you struggle, the more your muscles are strengthened. If I only remove my jacket, you'd see this, a perfect example of hardened muscles. Don't laugh. And so this butterfly did not have the opportunity to struggle, and therefore it was weaker. There's a famous story actually in Muncie. I think it's Muncie in New York. If Muncie is in New York, America, somewhere America. How big is America anyway? So it was there, and there was a storm, and they probably called it something like Martha or Dorothy or I don't know, Tracy. And I think it was Martha. It's called Martha. Storm Martha. And I feel really bad for Marthas and Traces and people who have storms named after them. Okay, and another talk. So this storm happened, and there was a whole row of houses in Muncie, and they were all built according to the same project. They all built exactly the same, and they all had the house and the chimney and I don't really know, but let's say it was red. And in front of the house was a tree, and the driveway and the mailbox, and you can imagine this scene. So there was a big storm, Martha, and the storm came and it ripped off loads of houses and It took away the whole street, and it took away out of the 10 houses. It took away 6 of the trees, and 4 trees remained, and they remained strong, and they were hurt. I mean, I didn't interview them to find their personality, how difficult it was for them, but physically they were damaged, but they were still there. The other trees had blown away, and there was some investigation because I think it was a very interesting phenomenon, and they wanted to know what is different about these trees. They were planted on the same day, in exactly the same way, and the storm came. What was special about these trees? And the investigation came up with the following conclusion, which was that these trees were not watered. The other trees were watered well. What did that mean? The trees that were not watered had to work harder to get their water. Their roots had to go further and, I guess, deeper. And that entrenched the tree further into the ground and made it stronger. Essentially, this is a message I've been saying. It's a message for life. That life and greatness and growth, it comes through struggle. If something's free, it's generally not worth it. That's really the essence of life, and that's certainly what we should be striving for. And perhaps that's the message of Rashi and the Talmud that says, even if it is in Shamayim, even if it's in heaven, even if you feel that it's in heaven so far away from you, that's the point. You have to go there. You have to learn it. You have to get it. You have to be great. That is the first message of the evening. It's actually 1:23 in the morning for me. So, okay, that was the first one. Next, let's move on to Deuteronomy 29:16. And that says as follows. Read in English. And you saw their abominations and their detestable idols of wood and stone, of silver and gold, that were with them. Okay, I'll say again. you saw their you saw their abominations and their detestable idols of wood and stone, silver and gold that were with them. So firstly, it's very interesting. I saw Rashi, just spoke about Rashi, saw Rashi on this, very interesting. It was talking about superfluous words and how they're not superfluous, they're coming to tell us a message. So he says this, why does it say, it should have just said, and you saw their abominations and their detestable idols of wood, stone, silver and gold. What do we need that were with them? What we're being taught that were with them? So I don't really have time to go into it in detail, but certainly he says as follows, that the wood and the stone, that just needs to be, and you saw the wood and the stone. When you see something, it means it's revealed. It's out there, it's in the field. Wood and stone is not expensive. It's something that it probably won't get stolen. And even if it got stolen, you just carve another one. But silver and gold, that needs to be with them. Silver and gold is with them. Silver and gold, that's already, you'll get it. They looked after their silver and gold. Okay, there's more to say about why and what, but that's just an interesting tidbit. Let's get on to the other message that I wanted to say. And perhaps it's another superfluous thing. This is essentially my question, but I believe it's been said before. And this is as follows. If you try to teach the message, again, superfluous words, additional words that don't need to be here, I would have just written the Torah and said, and you saw their abominations and their detestable idols. Meaning just a bit of background. God is warning them, you're telling them their past, telling them their history, and they're about to go into the land of Israel, Eretz Canaan, and he's going through what was, what is, and what will be. So in terms of Egypt, he said, you saw their abominations and the detestable idols. I would have stopped there. Why do I need to know that they were made of wood and stone and silver and gold and plastiline? Like, what we're being told, what message is coming out from these additional bits of information that is worthy of being recorded for all future generations? So one answer I heard is as follows, and again, it's something that we're trying to do, take out messages for life and apply it to us. So he says as follows, I think this was the Brisker Rov. I told this over to my son, he told me I said it. I think I heard it elsewhere. If it's good, it's his. It's not good, it's mine. He said, okay, as follows. What are we being taught? Wood, stone, silver, gold. Now really, when God says that message is, this is how you got into trouble. This is what you saw, this is what you craved, this is what you wanted, and essentially this is the message for generations. I'm going to say my own words, because these are the only words I have. That something, they were talking about idol worship, abominations, but let's speak about in our language. When we see things, the Yetzer Hara, for instance, that evil inclination, let's put it this way, when we get into trouble, when we do the wrong thing. So it starts off as wood, which is as follows, something flimsy. We've got a drive to do something. We know it's not for us. We know it's beneath our dignity. We know it's not going to give us real pleasure, but it's flimsy. It's nothing. It's wood. Okay, whatever. It gets the better of us, but it stays wood. But a couple more times, all of a sudden, it turns into stone. It gets heavier. It gets more solid. It gets more real. It gets less flimsy. It becomes more of a thing. Now, it's still worthless. It's still stone. Still pick it up anywhere, but essentially, it's just got that little bit harder. It's got that little bit more impactful into yourself. Now, if you continue to do that, if you continue to do it, whatever it is that you're thinking of, to continue with that, with what you're doing, if you stay in that dangerous place of, let's just call it sin, whatever it is, in any kind of thing, then it turns into kesef. It turns into silver. Now, silver is all of a sudden, it's got a value. Silver actually is not just valuable, it's something that you're a little bit proud to have. Someone who's doing a sin and continuing in that path eventually is going to come to consider it as silver. And this is the bit where it's really entrenched, because all of a sudden it's got worth. And if you continue to do it, in your eyes it becomes like gold. So perhaps that's what the verse is telling us, the progression of the evil inclination and what it did if you continue in the sin. Now the sin could actually be the same thing, We're not talking about different sins. It could be when you're doing something which you know is wood. It's a sin. It doesn't give any pleasure, no real lasting pleasure. And if you do it, the first night you feel bad afterwards. You speak about this person and you feel bad because you knew it's below your dignity. You see this thing and it was never intended for you, and you feel worthless afterwards. But if you keep on doing the same thing, starts off as wood, goes into stone, then kesef, then silver, and then gold. Kesef is silver, and then gold, and then it's really hard to get out of, because you think it's valuable, you think it's your value, it's what gives you success, and all of a sudden you don't even consider it a sin anymore. You'll turn it. The Talmud says you'll turn these things into a mitzvah. Not only am I not doing anything wrong, I'm doing the best thing for me, because if I didn't do this, I'd be doing this, or I'd be doing this, or I'm saving the world. Whatever anyone tells themselves that while they're doing something wrong, all the lies that come into our head, that's what's going to happen if you keep doing the wrong thing. All of a sudden, 2 years ago when you started doing it, you knew it was the worst thing in the world. All of a sudden, this is the best thing, because if you didn't do it, who knows where you'd be. That's what we tell ourselves. So that is the message, perhaps, of the progression of why it started off as wood, stone, silver, and then went to gold. Now, really, this message is there's a famous parable. I'm going to butcher it up and say it slightly differently, but I'll say it my own way. There's a knock on the door, and there's a vagabond, a ruffian, a vagrant. I'm probably making up these words. I think it's a vagabond. He comes to the door, and you open the door, and already you shrink in fear. He's firstly, an introduction to what I'm about to say. Firstly, I'm very in favor of kindness. Number two, I'm totally up for people welcoming guests and doing mitzvahs and good deeds and welcoming people into the house. That's what I want to start off with saying. Also, no fictional characters were hurt in the following story. That's my introduction disclaimer. So bearing in mind, I'm not against doing the right thing and kindness to people. Let's continue with the story.
Right.
Okay. So this vagabond is at the door and he knocks on, and he's you just know he's like he's horrible. He's smelly and stinky, and he looks dangerous. He's rude, and he's at the door and you say, yeah, hello, can I help you? He says, yeah, actually, can I come and use your facilities? And you really don't want to, but you're like, okay, he'll just come and he'll go and finish. He comes in the house, goes to facilities, comes out a minute later, and you're sort of waiting by the door. Okay, bye, thank you very much, thank you. And he says, oh, do you know what? Do you mind if I just get a glass of water? So you're like, okay, water, fine. Runs, get water. Here you go. Thank you very much. Said, I'm not eating in 2 days. I need a meal, please. And there happens to be a steaming hot soup on the table right in front of him, wafting into his nose, and he looks at it, and his eyes are aglaze, and you don't really feel like you've got a choice, so you say, sure, sit down. And he's sitting at the table, and he's eating disgustingly, and he's rude and he's aggressive, and you're just desperate to get rid of this guy. But he's not going. And after the soup, you can have another one. And after the soup, you can have any meal. And eventually, you're just stuck with him. And let's just finish the story. And, he's there for a while. And at some point, you go to welcome him out. And he's going to the door. All of a sudden, he goes to the door and he locks the door. He says, I'm not going anywhere. I'm now in charge of the house. So really, this is what I'm saying. It's a nice or not a nice parable, I guess, but it really is what it is. If you let sin, again, I'm not talking about any particular sin. Everyone's got their own things, and the goal of this, what I'm trying to say is for everybody to take what I'm saying, and I'm specifically being vague about certain things, not because I've got anything in my mind or want to hide anything. Everyone's got their own thing, and so I want everyone to take their own thing and apply it to this case. That if you start off, what was the person's first mistake? Remember, I'm not against kindness and welcoming guests into the house, but for the point of this purpose, for the point of this experiment, what was this guy's first mistake? He should have closed the door and say, I'm sorry, I don't know, we don't have facilities. We go to the bathhouse outside, like in the 1600s. That's what he should have said. He should have closed the door. And then, you know what? He shouldn't have even opened the door. But if you open the door, number one, you close the door as soon as possible. Number two, if the guy gets in the house, you find a way to get rid of him quickly. If he stays for too long, it's going to be so much harder to get it out. We're given opportunities in our own lives to always correct ourselves. I don't know if that's 100% true that we're always given the opportunity to correct ourselves, but we're always given the opportunity to better ourselves. And better ourselves might be a slight correction, which will lead to a bigger correction. If we're in a situation that is, I want to say sinful, but I don't want to sound like that. If we're in a situation which is bad for our growth, it's bad for who we are and who we want to be, then you have to get an escape plan. You have to get out. Now, it might involve creativity. It might involve self-sacrifice. It might involve moving, either environment, work, friends. It might mean anything. But like we said right initially, that life is to be lived in terms of growth and pushing ourselves. And it's a bit difficult. It's true. It can be very difficult. That's life. And that's our goal. And if we're struggling, it means we are earning. You know, I'm not saying that life is about earning and it's not why we should live. But in terms of how we should approach life, that certainly we should aim to be doing the best we can, and that certainly involves, as we said, as we've already said, self-sacrifice and pushing ourselves. In fact, this whole concept of becoming entrenched in sin or entrenched in our environment and not even realizing it's such a problem is actually sourced in Torah. I think it's the Medrash, could be Talmud, a bit embarrassed, I don't know, but I think it's certainly the Medrash. When Yaakov Avinu, when Jacob, our father, was taken to be buried in Marat Machpelah, which is the cave of Machpelah. Machpelah is translated as, I don't know, Machpelah. And so he was taken by the sons, by his 12 sons. He was taken to the cave of Machpelah, and there was one space left. Who's there to greet him by the entrance to the cave? It's his. Yaakov is lying as in his coffin, whatever they had, and Esav is there. He says, no. He doesn't come in here. This is reserved for me. So all of a sudden, the 12 sons, what are you talking about? And Esav says, yeah, this is my burial plot. So all of a sudden, they put Yaakov down and they're arguing back and forth, discussing it. They say, we've got proof, we've got a contract. Where's your contract? We don't have it here, it's there, we've got witnesses, I'm not interested, show me the contract. Eventually, they send Naphtali to run back to Egypt to get the contract to bring it back. In the meantime, there's one character who was unaware of what was going on. His name was Hush ben Dan. He was Hush, the son of Dan. All of a sudden, he looks up and he sees his grandfather lying in disgrace on the floor. And he sees the evil Esav arguing and preventing them going in. He goes right up to Esav and chops his head off. It sounds like a baseball bat. I don't know what, like a swish with a sword, a guillotine, whatever he used. So he chopped his head off. Interestingly enough, Esav's head rolled into the cave and it's buried there. And there's many Kabbalistic reasons why. It's very interesting for another time. But essentially, that's what Hush did. He saw what was going on. Yaakov was in disgrace and he chopped his head off. How did this grandson of Yaakov, why was he different than everybody else? The answer was, Hush was deaf. Hush was not aware of what was going on. All of a sudden he looked up, he saw Esav was disgracing his grandfather, punishable by death, and he did what he was supposed to do. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz asks, okay, so if that was the right thing to do, why didn't the sons do it? Why was it left to a grandson? So the answer Rav Chaim Shmulevitz gives is really what we've been saying. That once the children got involved in discussion with Esav, and they got involved in the back and forth and the argument, and we're right and you're wrong, and we've got proof, and all these things, they got in too far. They were not able to see the situation for what it was. They weren't able to assess that this person, Esav, was stopping their father being buried, and he had to go. It wasn't up for discussion, but they weren't able to extract themselves from the situation. They just weren't aware. And therefore, it took Hush ben Dan to see the situation from afresh and then go in and take care of it. So that again is the message of again, life is about assessing, whether we do it once a day, once a week, once a month. We have to reassess, are we living the life we're supposed to be doing? It's a mental exercise, and it could be difficult, and it could be frustrating when we realize that, no, but I can't change it, but really you can change it, and we have to change it. Life is let's say like this. Life is a precious commodity. Yeah, life is it's worth more than a business. If you had a business, if you saw the stock sinking or your profits were not existent, you would readdress the situation quickly. And if people needed to be fired, they get fired. And if people needed to change their approach, that's what you have to do. Now, isn't life more precious than business? Of course it is. It's hard. I'm speaking like, as if I do it all the time. It's hard. I try. We should all try. But that's really essentially what we all have to be doing. In fact, there was one Rabbi Mordechai Gifter, a phenomenal head of a yeshiva, and he was American, and he moved to Connecticut, I think a place called Waterbury, and there weren't many religious families there, and he was going from his comfort zone, as it were, of a religious neighborhood, and he was going to be the rabbi and the guide, the spiritual guide of a place called Waterbury in Connecticut. And he had a beautiful practice, and he had it because of what we've just been saying. There would often be in those days collectors, money collectors coming from Israel, where they say if you want to become a millionaire in Israel, you need to become a billionaire. That's how it goes. So us in Israel, that's where we are, and in America, obviously the streets are paved with gold. And therefore, you had a lot of collectors coming to America. So they would even come to Connecticut, Waterbury, and they would stay with the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Mordechai Gifter. He had a beautiful practice. Obviously, he would welcome them in. Remember, there were no vagabonds. He would welcome them in. Probably even if they were, he'd welcome them in, but not the sinful kind. He was a big, righteous person. And he'd welcome them in, and he'd give them money, and he'd bring them around to the community, to the wealthy people, and he would advocate on their behalf. He'd probably translate. And that's what he'd do. But before they left, he said, please, every single one of them, please do me a favor. Walk around my house. Go everywhere. Tell me if you see anything that you think is not appropriate. If you see anything that you don't believe should be here, you must tell me, because perhaps I'm desensitized. Perhaps I've got used to the situation and I don't know it's not supposed to be here. I need you from an outside perspective to come and tell me what shouldn't be here. And if there's anything, I'll get rid of straight away. So that was his practice, and that's beautiful, and really that's a message that essentially, to some degree, however much we can, we should be doing ourselves. Okay, that was part 1, Parshas Nitzavim. I made a blessing before. Vayeilech. Let's move on to Vayeilech. So since we already mentioned Mordechai Gifter, there's another very famous story. Again, it's famous, I know it, but I think many people know this story. He was actually once on a plane, and the pilot came on the speaker and said, everyone should brace themselves. We had an engine that just exploded, and we braced themselves for a crash landing. The end of the story is there was no crash landing. Don't worry. But in the meantime, everyone thought there was going to be a crash landing, and crash landings are not good. I was almost in a crash landing. But even if I wasn't, I'd still know it was not good. And he was amazed. What did Rabbi Mordechai Gifter learn from this experience, or at least what did he share? I'm sure he learned many things. The person next to him, as the steward was running down, addressing what needed to be addressed at the time, this guy next to him, he said, Stuart. He said, please get me a Coke. And Mordechai Gifter just looked at him. He said, what? Coke? He said, yeah, what? He said, a Coke? He said, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die after having a Coke. So that was the end of the story. Mordechai Gifter, he would often tell that story, and he would say, this is what this person essentially is living for. These are his last thoughts, a Coke. Now, coming into our Parsha, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's last thoughts? Now, we know in Deuteronomy 31:2, Moshe Rabbeinu said, this is my 120th birthday, and on this day he's going to die. Actually, it's 1:43 a.m. It's my birthday today. Now, I'm sure I can't see my audience over here. 22nd of September is my English birthday. I can't see the audience over here. No doubt they're already running to blow up balloons and buy kosher cake and write out checks. So the first thing I'll say is add a zero, but also actually celebrate my birthday, the Hebrew birthday, on Sukkot. So you've got time. Don't run away just yet. Listen to the rest of this. So Moshe tells the Jewish people he's 120 today, and essentially this is the day he's going to die. Now, what did he do? What did he do afterwards? So, I don't know, if I had to guess, I would say Moshe Rabbeinu is about to die. This is his last day of living. What would he do? He would learn. Moshe Rabbeinu, he would learn. Okay, maybe he wouldn't learn. Maybe he would teach. He would go, he would teach, he would prepare something. He would pray. He would get those last mitzvahs in. He would do something to spiritually elevate himself. But what did he do? He went to comfort the people. His death would obviously be a blow, as not an exaggeration. Essentially, it would be terrible for the Jewish people. It was terrible for the Jewish people. It had to happen, so it wasn't terrible. But essentially, his death would be very difficult for the Jewish people. And therefore, he went to each of the tribes and he comforted them. That really underscores Moses' his leadership. In fact, the very beginning of his leadership started when he was looking for other people, not even people. His leadership. How did he see the burning bush? So we're told that he was a shepherd, as all good Jewish leaders are, and he was the shepherd. And one of his sheep went off running, and he went to chase after it because he had a whole flock of sheep. One sheep went running, he had to look after it, and he realized he was very tired, very thirsty. He actually carried the sheep on his back because he was tired. The sheep was tired, and because of that care and consideration for one sheep, he was in the right place at the right time to see the burning bush, and thus started Moses' career, I guess, for none of a better word. And then we have in Egypt, even as he was the prince. In fact, this must have been before, when he was a prince. When he was a prince living in the Pharaoh's palace, he would run to the Jewish people and he would offer to carry their all the heavy things on their back, and he would care. His life was about caring. The golden calf, when the Jewish people, as it were, did a terrible thing, he prayed for them. With the spies, I'm not coming a list of things that we did wrong, but essentially at every juncture and at every difficult point in Jewish people's history, Moshe Rabbeinu was there to pray, cry, daven, and try and fix the situation. He was there for us. Even when God at one point said, "You know what? I will make a whole new nation from you. We'll start from you," and Moses said, "Absolutely not. If you're going to destroy them, destroy me with them." And we have to understand what everything meant and what it is, and the Jewish people is certainly eternal. But that's what it was. So Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership essentially was all about kindness. It was about caring for the other people. A leader in the Jewish people is not someone who's aloof, who's above and beyond and doesn't even look down. He's somebody who cares. He's the leader. He's the I can't think of the English word, the dogmatic. He's the role model. He's the role model. He's somebody to, when we see a leader, we're projecting what true leadership is, God's leadership, and that's what we see. So that was Moshe Rabbeinu's existence. That's what he did on the last day of his death, as it were. He went around. His final act was comforting the other people, because although he's got his own spiritual needs, he put others before him. Actually, I have a story about another Jewish leader, of Michael Lefkovich, which is a wonderful story. I don't know if it's famous, although I do know it. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. It will be famous now. Tell it to your kids. He was, I think, a Jewish leader. He was the head of yeshiva in Ponevezh, and he was walking. I think he was about 9. He's in early 90s, and he was walking one day with his sons escorting him, and he was walking. He lived in Bnei Brak, and when you see a leader of the Jewish people, and you stand still and you go and greet him, that's just what you would do. So there was a gentleman who happened to be in Bnei Brak for that Shabbat, and he saw coming down of Michael Yehuda Lefkovich, and he suddenly went close to him and he said, "Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom." And Rav Michael Yehuda stopped and he turned to him and he said, "Oh, good Shabbos." And he said, "Where are you now? Where do you live?" and how's your family, and what you're doing, and what you're learning, and how your children. He spent a few minutes with this stranger as if he was his best friend. And this man was astounded. And then the rabbi went off, and then all of a sudden he stopped by somebody else, and he also had a 5-minute conversation. And he said, "Wow, he must have just thought I was somebody else." And they looked at this other guy who also had the same interaction with this rabbi, and he was also bewildered. And they both sort of stood there looking at each other. What just happened? So then they sort of followed the rabbi, and they had a whole series of people like, "Wow, the rabbi just held 5 minutes with me asking about my family." Eventually, they couldn't. They're following around. They went to the son. What is going on? I'm a stranger. He's a stranger. This is a stranger. All of a sudden, like the rabbi's best friends. So the son said, "My father just had a cataract surgery, and he almost can't see. He has to go to the synagogue. He has to go to shul, but he almost can't see. He's so worried that as he's walking in the street, that somebody he knows, a student or a family member or something, will come to him, and he won't see him, or he'll just nod at him, or he won't see him, or just walk by. He's so worried about that few seconds of pain of that other person until they realize, oh, something's wrong, and they would fix the situation. He was so concerned that he was worth him spending his precious time, 5 minutes for every single person he met, in order not to hurt the one person who might be hurt for a few seconds." That is leadership. Tremendous story. Should be famous. Okay. Next, we're going to go to 31:29. This is a very sad verse. It really is. This is sad. It's essentially, if I remember, it's Moshe telling the Jewish people that they're going to stray from the path. It's sad. It's going to happen. There are Jewish people, and they're going to stray from the path. Now, I just want to take this as a jump, as it were, to this concept. Now, I'm going to quote Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. I think I quoted him before with Dan Manchush, he was deaf. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz wasn't deaf, but Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, he answered the question. He said, "Why?" And he was a generation ago. He said, "Why do people leave the path?" And essentially, this is a message that was relevant then. It's relevant now. I'll say how he said it then, but we can definitely apply it today. He said because people do not or did not have pride in what they do. For instance, in his days, which was obviously, he was in Israel, and there was abject poverty, and he was speaking about all over. In those days, you had these impoverished people, and they walked around with a burden on their shoulder, not a literal, but like an emotional burden on their shoulder. I'm sure it's from the war. I'm sure it's from everything. And yet you had, they were learning, they were doing what God wanted from them, they were doing mitzvahs, and then you had, this professor, this enlightened individual who had thrown off the shackles of Judaism, and he didn't keep Torah and mitzvahs, God forbid, and he was walking around with a blazer and gold buttons, like he was the king himself. And the kids would see their father, who looked disheveled and whatever, and they'd see this guy who's walking around with the gold buttons, and they think, "Wow, he's really, he is something." My father, he's an old man. He's only 40, but he just looks terrible. And this guy, he looks great. And Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said that generation, when the children see that in their father, and that on the other side, they're gonna automatically see that the other side has got something worthy. We spoke about gold and silver before. They saw the silver buttons, and they were wowed by them. In fact, we've got a bit of time left. That was Rav Moshe Feinstein. He actually said that a whole generation, there were Jews after the war, that they came to America. And in America, almost every factory and anywhere where they would employ a Jew, they would be open on Saturday, on Shabbat, and they would close on Sunday. And they had the following rule: if you did not come to work on Shabbos, you did not come to work on Monday, you lost your job. And there were Jews, a whole generation of Jews, who sacrificed everything for Shabbat. They said, "You know what? Okay, I'll get a job, and it'll last me till Friday, and then hopefully, I'll get fired, and then hopefully the next week I'll get another job." And this is what they did time and time again. But their children, even though there was such self-sacrifice, their children often left the path of their fathers, the path that their fathers had struggled so much. So Moshe Feinstein, he was another. Every name I'm saying is that the greatest of the greats. He was the greatest of the greats in America. He was, wow. So he said a whole generation of children were lost. Why? because they heard their fathers say, Shvet sein Yid, which is Yiddish for it's hard to be a Jew. He said, if they would have only heard from their fathers, you know what? I sacrificed another week for God. I did something else for Shabbat. How beautiful a nation are we that we're willing to live according to our morals and for God, and we're willing to do everything in self-sacrifice. This is what we should be doing. Rav Moshe said if they'd only lived like that, you'd have a whole second generation of Torah princes. But they didn't, because they didn't have pride in what they do. And essentially, the pride that we should have on our level is when we do something right, we should pat ourselves on the back and we should feel good about it. And however, we spoke right at the beginning about struggling, pushing ourselves. Even if we don't seem to get very far, the struggle itself is worth so much, and we should be so gratified for the opportunity, and we should be so proud of ourselves that we're actually fighting and not fleeing. And this pride is not going to help our own our own selves psychologically, but it'll help our children, our family, those around us. And really, it's a self-sense of pride for doing the right thing that I guess we need more of. We always need more of, and that will help the continuation of ourselves and our families. Now, since I anyway spoke about buttons, gold buttons, I'm going to mention another story. I won't keep everyone too long, but with William's permission, I'm going to go over the 1 hour mark again. So this story happened with another great, Elchanan Wasserman. He was in Baranovich, which was a town in Europe somewhere, I think Czechoslovakia, Poland, I'm not sure. Forgive me, Google. And he went to America to collect. Obviously, there was money in America, and there was certainly none in Baranovich. In fact, Elchanan Wasserman once said that if when poverty came to the world, 9/10 of it went to him, in his place. There was abject. I've said abject poverty, I think 3 times now. Can't think of another verb. So adjective. So there was immense poverty. There you go. So he went to America, and he heard that one of the people who used to be religious and was now super wealthy in America, and they were students together in their youth, lived in wherever it was, and he went to visit him. And this man was so happy. It's his old friend, his old student friend, and he'd heard he'd become a great rabbi, and he invited him to his home, and they met, and he came, and he said, "How are you?" They had a great meal together, and then they talked. And at the end of the meal, after a few hours of reminiscing about the olden days, the man said, "Okay, so, please tell me why you're here." And Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman said, "I just came, no reason." I said, "No reason?" I said, "Yeah, no, I just came to see you. You came," we're talking about 1900s. "You came all the way to America from Europe," which was not a plane journey. It was a lot longer. So you came just to see me? He said, yeah, come back to my office tomorrow. He understood that was money involved. He said, "Come to my office tomorrow, and maybe you'll remember why you're here. I'm very successful, I'm very wealthy, and I have a whole, I make suits, and I do tailoring, and I'm super, I'm happy to help you, whatever you need." So Rav Chanan said, "Okay, I'll meet you fine 2 o'clock tomorrow." So he came to the man's office, 2 o'clock the next day. And again, they spoke, and then the man just said, "Okay, why are you here?" He said, "The truth is, I did come for a reason." So the guy's like, "Okay, good." He's getting out his checkbook, and he says, "I have a button, and it's come loose. So do you think?" I'm a bit embarrassed to ask, "Could you thread it for me?" The guy's like, "Excuse me?" He said, "I have a button, and it's a bit loose. Will you thread it for me?" He's like, "What? You came for a button?" He says, "Yeah, I came for a button. And my button's loose. Thread it." So he says, "Okay, I'll thread your button." He threaded his button. He said, "Now, you happy? You don't need anything else?" He said, "No." He said, "You just came for a button?" He said, "Yeah, a button." "You came for a button from Europe to America? The 3-week journey, 6-week journey, whatever it was? You came all the way for a button?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "It's impossible. No one comes so far for a button." Rabbi Chanan turned to him and said, "And your soul, all the way from heaven, came all the way down to this world. And what are you doing day in, day out? What did you leave Torah for? What did you leave mitzvahs for? For a button, for buttons, for suits. That's what it's worth. You think your soul would come so far, further than Baranovich to America, further than anywhere to anywhere. It came from the highest of the heights down to this world, and you think it came for buttons?" The man got the point. and I heard he repented and he became a wonderful Jewish religious person. Okay, that was a button story. Now, I have a few minutes with your permission, William.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay. So I would really be remiss if I didn't mention the time that we are in now. Firstly, Nitzavim, Vayeilech, the two Parshas, the actual word Nitzavim is standing and Vayeilech is going. It's interesting. This is the time we're in at the moment. We stand and then we go. We stand to see what's going on. We spoke about making assessments and reflecting on where we're holding, and then we go forward. This really is the time we're in now. What am I talking about? It's just before Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the new year, and it's the day where God essentially judges entire mankind. What does it mean he judges? It means he says, I created you for a purpose. Are you fulfilling your purpose? If the answer is yes, you get life. If the answer is no, oy vavoy. So this is the day that's coming up. Now these days before Rosh Hashanah, right where we're holding right now, are called Yimei Rachamim, Yimei Ratzon. These words essentially and basically translate of days where God is showing much more favor to us than normal. He's much easier to appease. He's much closer to us in these esoteric sentences I'm saying. He's essentially, let's just say like this, that he's in terms of the verses, he's called Melech Besodeh. He's the king in the field. Meaning, normally if you want to go and see the king, it's very apropos. If you want to go and see the king, you have to go through the palace guards, and you have to you're never going to get in. You're never going to get in. But we just saw it, during the time when he's in the garden, during the time when, he happens to have to be outside his mother's funeral, talking about, this what's going on over here, when King Charles had to follow the hearse of his mother, then he was out in the open and he was greeting people. That's the way that you can meet the king in such circumstances. So this, to an extent, is where we're holding right now, just before the days of awe, just before these awesome days of judgment, where God is so close to us. Now, I just want to say, I heard already since I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Queen. I know you probably thought I've got some sort of North American accent, but I'm telling you, it might be very well hidden, but it's actually English. So it's a story I heard actually on the Queen's Jubilee, which was a few months ago, and her private, what he's called, I wrote this down, her royal protection officer, which is basically a glorified bodyguard for 14 years, used to hang around with the Queen. And the Queen used to go to Balmoral. Balmoral, I think, is a place in Scotland where she had a holiday home. Now, our holiday home might be like, I don't know, a one-bedroom caravan or something. Her holiday home was a castle, the castle in Balmoral. And apparently there was no one really there in the fields, and she would often go for walks with this royal protection officer. His name was Richard Griffin. Now, I'm telling you this because you should go Google and see this interview that he gave. It was hilarious. He said the following story, that he would protect the Queen, and she would go for walks, and he was the protection officer, essentially, the bodyguard. And she would often go for walks and picnics. And one day they were going for a picnic and a walk, and all of a sudden they heard noise, and there were two Americans that came up, and they were walking, and they approached them, and it was clear they didn't recognize who the Queen was. So they said, hello, and the Queen said, hello. Or maybe she didn't, maybe she just waved. I can imagine she said hello. She said hello, and they introduced themselves. She said, my name's Liz or Elizabeth, and where do you live? I live in London. Where do you live in America? And what have you been doing here? They had a whole back and forth of a pleasant conversation, I'm sure. And the American, one of the Americans said to both of them, said, how long have you been coming here? So the Queen, who they didn't know it was the Queen, said, I've been coming here 80 years now because I've got a holiday home over the hills. And they just realized, 80 years. You must have met the Queen, they said. So she straight away said, oh, I've never. But Dick here meets her on a regular basis. And she pointed to this Richard Griffin. And he's like, well, yes. And they said, wow, you're famous. What's she like? So he said, she can be quite contagious. Contagious. Okay, the word he used was something like contagious, and I Googled it, and it means she's not easy to be with. He was joking with her, and obviously they had this close relationship. And they were like, wow, you met the Queen. And all of a sudden, one of the American tourists puts his arm around the guy, gives his camera to the Queen. So, if you take a picture of us. So they took a pictures, and then he was very kind enough to say, and maybe you should take a picture of her as well. So they took pictures of her, and then they went off, and they never revealed who they were. And the Queen apparently said, I would love to be a fly on the wall when they develop those pictures, and I hope somebody tells her who I am. Essentially, the message I want to get from that very nice story is really to recognize that they didn't recognize the Queen. Now, Havdil was saying a different story, but these are the days where the king is in the field. We need to recognize the king. We need to recognize that these are auspicious times, and our prayers are going to be better heard, as it were. And everything we try to do, we've spoken about struggle, we've spoken about pride, we've spoken about trying to be better. This is the time. These days we're going to get even more help than we ever did. These are the days where we're going to push ourselves and get even bigger and better and stronger than we ever could do, because these are the days of mercy. These are tremendous, tremendous days. And I just finished with another story that I heard. There's another rabbi who died recently. His name was Rabbi Tovia. He was known as the Gaiva of Yerushalayim of Jerusalem. And he was in, forgive me, somewhere in Europe for the war. And he managed to get on the kinder transport. The kinder transport was trains essentially from Germany or wherever they were to London, to England. He was a 12-and-a-half-year-old boy, and he escaped to England. Now, this was, I think it was King George who organized it, and they wanted to bring a big reception and a thank you to King George. So they got all the boys who were saved. I think 1,000, I think they're boys, 1,000 boys who were saved, and they wanted to welcome the king. And they put them in each facing each other in a line like that. And the king would ride through them, and that would be the sign of appreciation, and they would wave British flags, whatever they did. So Rabbi Tovia, it must have been in the year, I think, 1942. He was standing in London, and the king was approaching. And there's a boy next to him. And the boy next to him all of a sudden jumped out into the crowd, from the crowd, and right in front of the carriage. And he said, please, please, king. And the bodyguards or the royal protection officers came and stopped him. And the king apparently stopped. And he said, no, tell me, what do you want? So he went to the king. He said, King, we're so grateful you saved our lives. We can't possibly thank you enough because you've given us the most precious thing. But let me tell you, our lives, my life, he's speaking about himself. He was a 13-year-old boy. My life is not worth living without my parents. You've given me life, physical life, but I can't continue without my parents. So apparently the king said, where are they? What are their names? He said, okay. The boy was released, as it were. He went back. 2 weeks later, the boy's parents arrived in London. This is what King George happened. This is what King George did for this boy. So if Yitzchak Tovia, who died, I think, also aged mid-90s a couple of months ago, he used to, this time every year, say that story that he was standing next to the boy, and he said the message is as follows: the king is here. He's right here to greet us. This is the days before the judgment, and this is when he's here. And if you take the opportunity to jump out, and this is when you can access him, as it were. You can speak to him, as it were. You can ask for things, and you can get closer and closer to him and get what you need from him in much of a better way than any other time of the year. Just like this boy was able to get to the king at this specific point because he was around and he was welcoming them and he got what he needed, so too we can take these days, approach the king just before his coronation on Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the year, which is, it's Monday night, I think. And he's here now. Take the opportunity, use it, grow, and grab every opportunity we can to become bigger and better people. It's my blessing to all of us that we use our opportunities, become bigger, we become greater, we become better people. We don't let's just go through. We said we don't fall for the wood and the stone and the silver and the gold. And we push ourselves, and we strive, and we strive, and we struggle, and we work, and that's what life is about. And please God, we'll all grab every opportunity and become the best and the biggest we could possibly be. I'm done.
That is a nice little wrap you got there. All right. Very cool. You still wrapped it up really tight, I just got to say.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate your time and your dedication to bringing us some awesome Torah teachings. So really appreciate it very much. Yes, sir. Very good. Okay, you guys, thank you all for tuning in. Nice viewer base tonight. This video, again, on the entire channel, the weekly Torah Parsha will be the only one moving forward. And Rabbi, this will be good information for you to know. The Torah Parsha each week will be the only video that we do live shows on that will never get moved away from public, just because there's not enough time really from Wednesday to Saturday for me to get it edited, and it shows up late. People won't get it in time. So, and that was Rabbi Rafi Mollot who brought that to my attention. He was very wise. And so all the weekly Parshas moving forward will be public right away. There will be no post-editing on it, but it'll be a nice clean video. You can also just look up the verses as he mentioned them as you go along, which thank you for pointing those out, by the way. That was excellent. And and that's that. So thank you all very much for tuning in. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on all notifications, and you won't miss a thing. So we'll see you a little bit later. Rabbi, thank you so much, and we'll see you all on the other side. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. For the record, today's date is August 29th. I'm super excited about the way things are going. I'm running Tanakh Talk full-time now. Baruch Hashem. November will mark 8 years. It's hard to believe we've been around that long. I just finished creating the new schedule template, which will account for 3 shows a day, maybe even 4. This will be later on down the road, of course. Sundays, however, will only have 1 show. That is set aside for Rabbi Tovia singer. Monday morning, 8:30, Rabbi Michael Skobac, and I will eventually fill that same time. 8:30, 9, 1 show in the morning, 3 shows in the afternoon/evening time. 3 p.m., 5 p.m., and 7 p.m. Central. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel full-time by going to the website, tanakhtalk.com, TANACHTALK.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting Tanakh Talk. Shalom. Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה